Good afternoon, LBC Radio. This is Corey Rosen with. Hey, wait a minute. No. All right. I forgot to turn off the radio. Right. So this is Corey Rosen with the Story Podcast. I have on with me a special guest, Chad Hogg. Chad Hogg is a Lancaster County native who has also lived in Bethlehem and Williamsport before returning home 4 years ago. He has played woodwinds and handbells as a child, but was mostly uninterested in popular music until he was introduced to the third wave of ska in 1997 and dove from it into an appreciation for punk rock and heavy metal. He first picked up a bass guitar in 2001 while a student at Ursinus 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 College, majoring in computer science and minoring in music and mathematics. After completing a doctoral degree in computer science, he has taught at Mansfield University, Ursinus College, King's College, and now Millersville University. He has performed in school and college ensembles, various church-related teams, and several short-lived bands over the years. In 2019, he was delighted to find three like-minded strangers in the Lancaster area to form Ford the River, a local dad punk band, and to be able to do music as a serious hobby while maintaining a career in another field. Ford the River has released its debut album, Adult Thoughts, in early 2021 and has been releasing a single each month of 2022. They have upcoming shows at Pilger Brewing in Pottsville on May 21st, Telus 360 in Lancaster on May 25th, Shovelhead Tavern in Altoon on June 18th, the Skid Row Garage Benefit Show at Central Market in York on July 23rd, Stage on Her in Harrisburg on August 11th, and the Carnival of Chaos 2 at the Church in Lebanon on August 13th. That's a lot of dates.
It is.
How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, reading the intro, you had talked about getting into the third wave of ska.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna assume is that what inspired you to get into music, into what you wanted to like play music, or?
Yeah, it was a couple more years after that before I got interested in trying to play it myself, but that was the kind of music I was first interested in playing.
So what is ska? I've never heard that term before.
All right, well, you're going to get schooled.
Okay, cool.
The first wave of ska started in the 1960s in Jamaica, and it was sort of a mixture of the things that they've been doing there for centuries with what they're hearing from R&B stations coming down from the United States. It's primarily recognizable by what the guitars do, or sometimes other instruments, which is to play only on the upbeats. So, da, 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 da,
Yeah.
da, da, da.
That's cool. So it's very syncopated.
Yes. Then the second wave of ska was a bunch of English musicians who heard that and incorporated it into their music in the 1970s. Some bands that you might have actually heard of from back then would be the Specials, the English Beat, Madness.
Yeah, the only 70s bands I'm familiar with are like, I guess maybe that's earlier, but like Elton John, Queen, Deep Purple back then too.
Yeah.
Like some of the more popular, well-known bands. I'm trying to get into the more nuanced bands of back then because there's a lot of music. There's always a lot of music to explore, but there's a lot of good music that just so happened didn't know the right people or didn't hit the right stations that just never made it. So the third wave of ska.
Yeah, so the third wave of ska was in the mid to late 1990s in the United States, when people who'd grown up listening to the second and first waves of ska mixed it together with the kind of punk rock that was super popular at the time.
Any bands for that?
Sure. So the ones that you really should have heard at some point on the radio, even if you didn't know them by name, would be the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and Real Big Fish.
I've heard about Real Big Fish. I have heard about that. Okay, so I've got my homework set out to do. So that's what really inspired you to dive into music.
Yes.
So when was the first time you were like, okay, you had said you had done clarinet and handbells, but what was the primary purpose of that?
So I played clarinet because in fourth grade they came around and said, "Who wants to play an instrument?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like fun. What instrument would you like to play?" Well, my mother owns a clarinet from when
Mm,
she was in school, so I'll play that because then you don't have to rent one.
that's right. That's I if I had gone that route, I went the route of percussion because I don't have to buy percussion. They give us that. But I would have been playing flute, and to this day, I cannot get a single sound out of the flute. It's one of the I have played clarinet for a while though. Clarinet's fun. You also did handbells.
I did at a church.
So it's more like a church kind of related thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's very simple. You get like four notes you're responsible for. I might have been G, G sharp, A sharp, and whenever
Mhm.
you see one of those on the staff, you play it.
It,
But it's a fun ensemble.
it is a fun if you've never had the chance to hear a handbell ensemble. It is really gorgeous, especially when you're in like a cathedral, almost like a big open space. It's one of my most favorite sounds, because you can really just play with it. It's and granted, it might seem easy, but you do have to be good at counting,
Sure.
and that is. I've noticed that's a thing a lot of people lack sometimes. Um, so you were uninterested in like the popular music of the time.
Right. When I was a kid, well, first of all, going way back, what I remember as like a 6 to 8 year old would be quite often we would go to these concerts in the park that were free, and there'd be a different genre every week. But you just go hang out, set a blanket on the ground, and sit there. Kids would run around and play in the park and listen to the music.
That's
We
cool.
did that all the time, and that probably has something to do with me becoming interested in music.
That's really cool. That was or you were you did you grow up around here?
Yep, I grew up the first 5 years of my life in Christiana, which is just across the border into Chester County, and then the rest of my childhood in Gap, which is right next to it, but on the Lancaster County side.
So I guess they don't still do those things.
They certainly do some of them. Like the biggest ones were in Longs Park. I know they still have that concert series, but we went other places too. I don't know if they're all still active.
Cool. I'll have to check that out in Longs Park. So you did that. Then why were you uninterested in the popular music?
I don't know. I just wasn't. The first music that I was interested in for myself was more like the music from video games, John Williams scores
Oh
from
yes.
films, things
Yep.
like that. All instrumental music, which might have something to do with it.
That's
But just like the radio would be on in the school bus, and I just did not enjoy any of that music. I don't really know why.
that's interesting because I oh, I I feel like everyone who gets over the age of 20 says this now, that the music of today kind of sucks. But as a kid, I was really in the country, like ungodly into the country, and people I know will scold me for that. But yeah, I thought it was really cool. Like the popular kind of like Carrie Underwood, Luke Bryan, I guess he's still around, but and like Tim McGraw, that kind of era, it was like really good music. And then when it started getting to like popular music, the only recently songs that I've been really into are like by Fun, or like the one hit wonders, and because they're one hit wonders, so they have to be good if they're one hit wonders.
Uh huh.
And but I've never really gotten into like Billie Eilish or like Zayn or any of the newer like rappers, or I'm still into Eminem. Eminem is awesome. Um, but never really got into any of the more modern, newer sounds.
I was using popular music in the broadest possible sense, not referring to pop music, but just any non-art music. I was
Oh,
meant
really?
to.
Okay, so it's literally just like any like
Not
song, like
country, rock, any of that.
so there's general like what was popular of the
Yeah.
day. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, so you just more like so you grew a love of music more through the like artistic side for like video games, cinema, film, and so did you ever find any interest in classical music at all?
Not really. I mean, I didn't dislike it, but I don't recall a time when I would have ever put on a classical CD
Fair enough.
intentionally.
Fair enough. So did your interest grew from that, and did you grow up wanting to play the bass line to Super Mario's, or?
No, I didn't have any interest in playing bass at the time. I don't think I really had interest in playing any other instrument. Like I was playing the clarinet from the fourth grade and enjoyed that well enough, but
Okay.
didn't have any specific motivation to try out anything else.
Did you do marching band at all?
I did.
How was that?
It was fun.
I bet you still have casts of steel from doing that.
Probably not.
Oh, really?
It's been a long time.
I still have. Well, I marched the Glockenspiel, and usually that's in like the pit, but they had like a carrier for me, so I did like miles in that thing, and that's probably why my back is so screwed up. But I tell you what, I can walk for miles and not be upset about it. So I'm grateful. But when did you like? I'm assuming for a time you just didn't play a musical instrument, or is that not the case?
No, that's not the case. Once
Okay.
I started the clarinet, I played the whole way through the rest of elementary, middle, and high school. Also picked up in the middle of high school the alto saxophone because I wanted to play in the jazz band, and the contrabass clarinet, which many people have never even seen one of, because they were making a wind ensemble at the school and needed one and asked if I would do it. I guess that was my first experience with playing very low notes.
The contra clarinet. That's awesome. It sounds
It was
really
pretty
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of breath.
Yes, which I'm not particularly good at.
Fair enough. So when were you at a point where you're like, I want to try bass?
So, well, before there, we get to me discovering the third wave ska music.
Okay, yeah.
This is in 1997. I was a sophomore in high school. And then I became way more interested in everything related to that genre. And back in the day, there's very little internet. So the way you find out about other bands is if what you're listening to is actually popular, you listen to the radio. But if what you're interested in is underground, you buy one album and you read the liner notes to it. And it says, like, thanks to all our friends in this band and this band and this band. And then you go buy an album from one of those and check it out and see who they thank in their liner notes.
Oh, wow. So, like, you literally had, like, to seriously network to, like, rather the bands, like, really collaborated almost to, like, sell each other's music.
I don't know if that was an intentional thing they were doing, but it certainly worked out that way for me.
That's cool. I wonder if that wasn't. I bet it was. I feel like that's something that people would be like, hey, if you mention me, I'll mention you.
Yeah, it certainly would have been smart for them to do so.
Absolutely. So you got into ska. You realized maybe clarinet isn't the best option for ska. And then
clarinet is definitely not the best option for ska, I can tell you.
So then do you think about, oh, do I want to play electric guitar, or do I want to play bass, or do I want to play drums? Did that conversation happen in your mind?
Yeah, not until a few years later when I got into college, though. So around the same time, three things happened while I was in college. One was the jazz band that I was playing alto sax in had a bassist who was going to graduate at the end of the year, and there was no other bassist at the school. Because I went to a college where, very conveniently for me, there was a music department with music faculty members and ensembles and whatnot, but there was no music major. So everyone who played in those ensembles was an amateur like myself, somebody who was actually studying something else, but enjoyed playing music as a hobby.
Do you think that was good for you, or?
Oh, absolutely, because I'm sure I would not have gotten into the ensembles if there'd been actual good musicians there.
It's an interesting point because there's a MWPA music department here, music degrees, but it's open to everybody. Anybody can get in. So I want, but then again, I guess you can only have so many musicians.
Right, and especially in something like a jazz ensemble, you need one bass player.
One bass player, yes,
you need
that's
two
right.
alto
That's
saxophone
right.
players.
Fair, yeah. I guess that's yeah. That's interesting to think about the politics of like that kind of situation. So he graduated.
Yep. Or actually, I think he transferred to a different school. But in any case, he was leaving. At the same time, I was participating in an organization called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, basically a kind of church that met on campus for students. And they would play music as part of their services. They had some guitarists who would lead it. They didn't have a bass player. Seemed like having a bass player there might be nice. And the ska music that I was interested in is all bass driven. It's the most interesting melodic instrument in all that music.
Really?
So it seemed naturally that if I was going to pick up a different instrument, bass would be the one to pick up.
So I'm going to make a generalization here or an assumption. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Sure.
Ska and punk are almost kind of related in that the guitar is more chordal.
Yes.
And then the bass line is free to do kind of whatever it wants almost.
Yes, very
Okay.
much so.
So that's probably the connection between ska and punk
Mm-hmm.
rock. Okay. So how did you start learning bass? Was it just by ear? Did you just take lessons?
So I asked my parents to get me a bass for Christmas halfway through my freshman year of college. And they did buy a short scale bass, which I don't recommend, and some terrible practice amp that came as a combo. And I did take a couple of lessons with somebody who went through how would you play along to this folk song or this blues song. But I thankfully already knew how to read music from having played other instruments. And so I was able to kind of just sort of figure things out on my own. I was also in college taking music theory classes, so I was understanding how to construct a bass line that way.
That's good. Yeah. Well, at one point for the worship teams here, they needed a bass player, and my friend was like, "Hey, do you know how to play bass?" And I was like, "I can figure it out because I know kind of how to play guitar." And so I know the basic strings, and at that point it's just counting frets.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a musician. I'm a well-trained musician. So after that, it was pretty simple, really. Just count the frets. Granted, you have to do it very quickly. However, it's one of the easier string instruments to pick up, I think.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun too.
Because you can just play the root of the chord until the chord changes and play the root of the next chord, and it will sound fine.
That's right. And you don't even have to be fancy with it. You can do whole notes the entire time, or you can do quarter notes the entire time.
Sure.
And then, but I think the beauty of the bass is that it's like, for example, a string. If it was just like that the entire time, it would get, annoying at some point because it's higher range stuff. But with the bass, it's beautiful in all of its complexities. So you can do simple stuff, you can do chordal stuff with bass, you can do some of the most advanced things that nobody would ever think about with bass, and people are going to go nuts no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So it's one of the reasons why I love bass, because it's so applicable to everything. Can use bass. Not everything needs a violin, or not everything needs a saxophone. Not everything needs a piano, for you. That matter. Not everything needs a guitar, but you have to have a bass line.
Mm-hmm.
So you got into that?
Yep.
And did it only grow from there?
Yeah, pretty much.
Did you ever take a hiatus from bass playing when you moving, because you said you've moved around a little bit?
There have been plenty of times when for months or years in a row I did never play in front of other people, but I always kept picking it up and playing it on my own.
That's good. That's one of the things I'm kind of bad about. I have so many instruments that I want to learn, but it's just a matter of picking them up and actually doing the hard time to practice. So was that ever a challenge for you, or was it always, I love to play bass, I'm going to play bass now?
Yeah, it was always my favorite thing I could do. And so I may have spent time on other things like video games or something, but generally, if I had some free time, it would be one of the things toward the top of my list that I would prefer to do with it.
That's good. That's good. I wish I was like that. I think my fear is that, especially string instruments like cello, violin, and bass and guitars, I'm gonna mess up my fingers and it's painful, and I just don't want to go through it because I'm a whiny person.
I've somehow never built up the calluses that people talk about. It doesn't seem to bother me.
Really, it's so interesting because every time after I'm done playing a guitar, I can feel the strings are digging in, and it's okay. There's going to be a blister there or whatever it is soon, but and that's always turned me off of playing the string instruments because I'm like, ow, it hurts. I'm such a whiny baby.
Well, yeah, the only time I play guitar is just to hear what some chords will sound like in a row while I'm demoing something. And so because my fingers are totally unused to those smaller strings, they do absolutely bite into my fingers.
Yeah.
But the bass strings don't hurt me at all.
That's cool. I have found that to be the case, except when I'm picking. But maybe that's because I'm picking it wrong or something. But
Maybe.
after a while, my first finger, feels rough,
Hmm.
to say the least. So, were you involved with other bands while you were moving around before Ford?
A little bit. When I lived in Bethlehem, the reason I was there is because that's where I went to graduate school at Lehigh University. Some friends of mine from Ursinus College, who were now alumni, like I was, reached out to say they were starting an alternative country band. I had absolutely zero interest in alternative country, but I'm not going to turn down an opportunity to play with some people, especially some people I like.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't work out very well, though. We had one rehearsal, and then the lead guitarist was diagnosed with lymphoma.
Oh no.
And then, amazingly, he beat it. And about 2 years later, we got the band back together with a different drummer, had one rehearsal, and then his lymphoma reappeared. And so that was the extent of that band.
Mm. That's unfortunate.
Yeah,
It's very ironic. No alternative country for you.
apparently not.
Apparently not. What's it? What are some songs that would be considered alternative country?
Well, because I'm not terribly interested in it, I don't know that I'm a good person to answer that. I know there
Fair
are
enough.
bands like Wilco, and I can't name any others.
Fair enough. Because I couldn't name any off the top of my head either. Because I don't even know what would alternative country sound like is my question.
So, in theory, it sounds like if you do the same things that turned rock to alternative rock to country, you get alternative country.
But there's the problem. I don't know what was considered alternative rock. Like, and this has been a process I've been trying as a composer. I've been trying to navigate because there's so many genres.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they get all thrown under the same umbrella. But people are very, 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 very particular with their genre naming, and I got no problem with that. But it's just a problem of me not knowing.
Right.
So what would be the difference between rock and alternative rock?
I don't know. I think alternative rock is just, for lack of a better word, weirder, more experimental and interesting.
More like progressive almost.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, that explains it. So it's breaking the cliches of the genre.
Yes. I think that'd be a
Gotcha.
good way to put it.
Cool. Okay, so you did that band. What was next for after that?
So next, while I was still living in Bethlehem, they had a festival every year called Music Fest. It's a
Mhm.
very big deal. Practically the whole city shuts down. There's 7 or 8 different stages that run pretty much continuously from 10 or 11 in the morning until 10 at
Wow.
night. Yeah, it's really cool. And most of it is free. There are some ticketed shows.
Oh, does this still happen?
Yes.
I'll have to check that out.
And it's in the summer. And as a then graduate student, I didn't have a lot of responsibilities during the summer. I also didn't have kids at the time. So I would just go to Music Fest all day for 7 days in a row and see lots and lots of music.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's one of the dreams I want to do is run like a festival that like kind of like that. Is that I feel like that would just be so much fun.
I enjoyed a lot of what I saw there. But what I've enjoyed the most were bands that played soul, R&B, funk kind of music, especially a band that was kind of pretending to be the Blues Brothers.
Okay.
And so I decided I'd really like to be in a band like that. This is feel-good music that anybody would enjoy, get up and dance to.
Yeah.
And so I tried starting that band. And I knew a guitarist who was great. I knew a trumpeter and a saxophone player who were great. I did not know any drummers, or at least not any who wanted to be involved in the project, nor any vocalists. And so that band got through maybe 10 rehearsals with a shifting lineup of drummers. Sometimes there was a vocalist there, sometimes there wasn't. We never managed to get somebody to commit before I got the call that we were going to be moving to Williamsport, because my wife is a physician, and part of being a physician is after you finish medical school, you go to residency.
Yes.
And the way that your residency is determined is there are a whole bunch of programs all across the country there are a whole bunch of people interested in them. Everybody ranks their favorite programs, and the programs rank their favorite candidates. And a big computer algorithm goes through and says, "You're going to Williamsport." And so we were going to Williamsport.
That's wild.
And given that the band was never getting a consistent lineup, it made sense to not try to commute 2.5 hours and keep that going.
Right. So do new opportunities show up in Williamsport?
No, not really. And I'm still playing in churches, still responding to Craigslist ads in hope of finding something, but nothing ever really worked out that way.
So when was your next experience with the band?
Ford the River.
Ford the River.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about?
So that came about in, I guess, 2018. Must be, though that seems so long ago.
Right.
When Kevin, our rhythm guitarist and lead vocalist, made a Craigslist ad for a casual punk band, which sounded like exactly what I was looking for. Because the problem with trying to meet random strangers and form a band is many of them have delusions of grandeur that they're going to go travel the world, and be rich and famous,
Right.
which I was not at all interested in. And others are so lackadaisical that, like, you can't get them to actually
There's no
practice
organization.
the songs
Yeah.
they say they want you to do. But this was sort of right in the middle. People who are serious about doing this well, but it's a hobby. We're going to be a local band. We're going to have a lot of fun and not expect anything more than that.
Cool. That's truly and that's like one of the things I've realized being around Nashville, Chicago, other places I've been, is that Lancaster is like the only real place where you can settle down and be like a local-ish band and constantly get gigs after gigs after gigs. And that's or like the Lancaster area, because you you have Columbia down the way, York just a little bit further. You have Harrisburg, literally with all within like an hour's worth of driving, which is unheard of in other places around the world, around the U.S. and around the world.
Sure.
But, so, what was it like? So he advertised on Craigslist.
Mm-hmm.
That's bizarre to me.
That seems to me like the way that anybody who doesn't know people but wants to form a band would do it.
Really?
What's the alternative?
I don't know. I would. That's a fair point.
And they have a board that is specifically for musicians trying to meet up with other musicians.
Do they?
Mm-hmm.
I've never used Craigslist in my life. That's probably why this is so bizarre to me.
Yeah, it's just the internet version of having a bulletin board in the guitar shop where people post advertisements.
Huh. I'll have to check it out. Because I'm always interested in doing smaller band kind of like that, where it's more like localized, not lackadaisical, but manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's fun. It's fun to go out and make some people dance, make some money, and then get to have a fun, nice, relaxing time, and then go home.
Yeah.
So throughout this process, how does one pull together a band? Because you guys do most of your own songs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what is it like to go throughout the songwriting process to figure out, hey, this is actually a pretty good thing, or maybe we shouldn't do this, or maybe we should tweak this. How all does that work within your band?
Well, before getting into the songwriting, just getting the band together in the first place, I think we were just very lucky. Kevin and the other guitarist in the band, Matt, had actually met about a year earlier, and so we're already somewhat familiar with each other. And we found a drummer, and we just all happened to have very similar lives and very similar interests as far as the way we want the band to go, at least for a while. We'll get to that later, probably. And so it actually fell together very easily. We just communicated by email a bunch, and then some people suggested some cover songs that we should learn and be prepared to play together. We rented a rehearsal space in, what's it called? SOCA. I can't remember what the S stands for anymore. Station 1 Center for the Arts, which is a really cool space in downtown Lancaster that rents out space to artists of all kinds. Unfortunately, I believe it went under due to COVID, but it was a really cool space. And so we showed up there, all awkwardly stared at each other, played through one of the songs that we'd agreed to rehearse together, thought it went pretty well, played through it again, thought it went pretty well again, and said, all right, let's work on this song that Kevin wrote. So the very first time we were together, we ignored all those other cover songs we were going to work on, and started working on this song that he and Matt, the other guitarist, had started writing together, or I guess Kevin had mostly written it, but then Matt had added some things a year earlier. That's a song called Livin' Man Livin' that I believe we're going to play later.
Yeah.
Or now, whatever makes sense.
Well, let's play now. Why not? So, Livin' Man Livin', what is the song about?
Well, as I didn't write it, I can't tell you exactly what was in his head, but just from knowing the lyrics, I think it's about people asking, how are you doing? Or what are you doing? And not having a real good answer, not feeling like you know the path your life is on, but you're living. Mm-hmm. You made it through the end of the day, you're going to make it through tomorrow, and you'll figure it out eventually.
Fair enough. So this was one of the first songs Kevin had written?
The first, as far as I'm aware. At least
song.
The first one that he brought to us.
Okay. So this is Livin' Man Livin' from Ford the River. That was Livin' Man Livin' by Ford the River, more specifically by Kevin.
Yes.
So, what was it like to collaborate on that song? And was it just a bunch of improvising? Was there led direction for that song, or how did that?
There's rarely with us any direction for anything other than just here are the chords, here's the melody, we'll figure it out together. So he brought it in, gave us a chord sheet that says, the chorus is C, F, C, F, C, F. That's the verse, whatever. And played it for us. And we just sort of started playing with him and figuring out what worked. I would try to listen to what he's doing, what the drummer's doing, and find something that sort of melds them together.
Right, because especially with bass, you have to pay attention to the drumming and the guitaring, because if you do something completely different, then it's gonna sound all sorts of disjointed.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, that's really interesting because a lot of the ways that you're lucky that you had a person who knew what chords they're playing.
Definitely, that helps.
Yeah, some of the people that I play with, they're all learned by ear. They all do things by ear, so they've got no clue what they're playing, and I'm just sat there trying to figure out. And I don't have the best ear, so it's kind of painful sometimes that I have to sit through and this. But that is what we do. There is not really much direction unless sometimes there's direction, but it's more of just like what's the feeling of this moment in time and what are we swelling to? Because I'm sure you guys don't play the same you don't play it the same exact way every single time. Or do you?
Once we've settled on an arrangement, we do try to play it pretty
Okay.
much exactly the same every time.
Fair enough.
Not sure that we always succeed in that, but that's our goal.
Right, okay. That's fair. Well, I guess there's not much room because it's very cordial, right? And it's very rhythmically motivated.
Yes.
So I guess there's not much room to improvise or leave room for like swells or that kind of stuff anyway. Yeah, I guess it's an interesting point in punk that's it's more just straightforward than you get to. It's not malleable really.
Yeah, the only thing that can change without making it sound and feel different is the lead guitar. So he sometimes plays different things or doesn't play or whatever.
That's interesting.
The rhythm tracks are pretty much all, this is the way it goes, we should play it that way.
I'm learning a lot today. So, at what point did you feel confident enough to bring out your own music to them? Was that ever a problem for you? You have said that you were an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
Was that ever a hurdle you had to get past, or were they just like, do you have any music?
Well, before even getting to that, just playing with them was incredibly difficult for me at first.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because what if I'm playing poorly? What if the parts I'm writing here don't make sense to them?
Mm-hmm.
So it took a while to get comfortable with that.
Was there any pushback?
No, they were. Everyone's been very supportive of everybody else.
That's good. That's so you almost felt a little bit of like imposter syndrome, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's something I definitely felt when I came into the gigging scene in Lancaster. I've only been doing like this kind of stuff for like a year now. So it was really interesting to come into. I don't know if you know any of these bands, but like General Semantics or Bjorn Jacobson. Does that ring a bell? Or
No.
Nate Arndt. Well, Liam.
I know him from having been on your podcast.
Okay. Well, some of these more local, like open mic kind of acts, not necessarily concert acts, but local mic acts, that were really big. They drew in they could fill out the entirety of Tellus, and so it was kind of hard to be like, hey, can I play piano for you? And you're a solo guitarist, can I play piano? And because especially hard because piano, you have to know when to play, right? And that's with any instrument. You have to know, because with the piano you can really drown each other out with the guitar, and that's the thing I'm still learning to this day, is that if he's down in the lower, I'm going to take it up higher, but I have to be softer because it's higher, and I can't really do all this magical stuff because it doesn't make sense, and it's going to take away from the guitar. If he's up high, I could play more low, or if there's a bass person, then I can't play any bass notes because right. I can't play the bass line because there's already a bass line. So it's been a lot of working with that, but I guess with this band, it's very straightforward, where you have like the lead guitar, which is the higher end, the bass, which is the lower end, the drums, which is the drums, and then you have the rhythm guitar, which is the middle, and then the voice, which it seems like mid-high range almost the entire time.
Yeah,
that must be really fun and easy.
It is.
That's and yet you still had this anxiety?
Yeah, I think anxiety would be a perfect way to put it. So I just in general have social anxiety. I'm perfectly comfortable here talking to you because we have like a role we're filling, and so I know what I'm doing. I'm perfectly comfortable in my job as a professor because I have a role. I know what I'm doing. But if we just like ran into each other out on the street, I would be very nervous about talking to you. Like, what would we talk about? What do I do when there's a lull in the conversation, etc.? Yeah. And I felt exactly the same thing, heightened, going into playing with a band that I really, really wanted them to like me and for this to work out, but didn't really have any experience to lean on.
Gotcha. So you had all these expectations without the resume to fulfill it.
Yeah.
Kinda. Yeah. So at what point did that go away? Or start to go away?
After 2 or 3 rehearsals.
Oh, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So when was the first time that you brought one of your songs to them?
That's a good question. I would say it was probably 6 months after we started playing. Not because it took that long for me to feel comfortable bringing a song to them, but because it took that long for me to have written a song that I felt was any good.
Gotcha. So how long have you been writing songs?
Well, for, I guess I can say decades at this point, I've written chord progressions, guitar riffs, bass lines, things like that, because those are the things that I'm interested in when I'm listening to a song.
Mm-hmm.
But none of them ever turn into something that other people consider a song, because a song needs to have vocals. And I don't care very much about vocals, or at least lyrics, when I'm listening to things. But if I'm going to have lyrics in a song that I'm going to say, this is my song, I wrote it, then I'm going to care greatly about them. And
Right.
I've got to come up with something that I really think is worthy of being sung about.
That's good. That's there are many songs today that I'm like, you could have. What's the point of saying that? Or that's been said 1,000 times in that exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
And lyricism is you can write music. I feel like sometimes you can either write music or you can write lyrics, and there's the people who can do both are geniuses. I've always struggled with lyrics. I'm more of an instrumental composer for sure. And so I guess that's what you were making, more instrumental pieces.
Yes.
That's cool. Well, those have their place for sure. I made a few instrumental tracks and I released that just on its own, and people like it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't. I don't want to sound like you're scared or anything, but I would encourage you to, if you have something that you think is good and worthy, to share it.
Yeah, I think what I had was all the kinds of things that still need some melodic, interesting thing over top. They were just rhythm parts.
Gotcha. Okay.
But so there are many songs that I love dearly that I could not tell you what the lyrics are. I don't really listen to lyrics. But the ones that I do care about are always like very specific, telling a very specific story. They're not vague. In some way, they're not artistic because you can't interpret them into your own life.
Do you have any
and so
examples?
I started.
One that would come to my mind would be Hotel California.
Yeah, that's it's a good song. Very specific imagery, but still kind of like you could listen to the whole thing and say, "What is that actually about?"
Mm-hmm.
The kind of songs that I gravitate to the lyrics of don't really have that. It's like, oh, I know exactly what this is about.
Okay.
They just told me.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, then you were going on to say.
So when I wanted to write songs that had lyrics, I wanted to start with that. I want to tell a story that's interesting to me, and that is very specific and clear.
Oh, gotcha.
And once I had lyrics, then I would just sort of sing the lyrics to myself in my head, and from that find not necessarily the melody, but the rhythm of the melody at least, how those words are going to fit together, and then just sit down with a guitar or piano and sing them while playing chords until I find something that sounds good together.
That's cool. That's typically how I do it. I've been told that I'm really good at making melodies or hooks, by my previous professors and composition teachers, but it's where the lyrics come in where it's just like, bleh. Especially because it's hard because you have to. People who listen to music never think about how melodies or even like lyrics are crafted, because there are some words you cannot say in a specific amount of time, or there's like the accents that English has on different like syllables. Like when it comes down to Shakespeare, like the what is it called? Like the iambic pentameter, where the stressed and unstressed. So that's what it's called. The stressed and unstressed. You can't put in. It's hard to get a good song with the unstressed syllable on the first beat. It's typically you have to have the stressed on the beats and then the unstressed on the upbeats.
Yeah. I think that's why I have to start with lyrics for anything that's going to have lyrics, because if I want them to tell a coherent story and be like real and not just whatever fits in to make it work and still follow a rhyme scheme, still follow a metric scheme, I have to have no constraints on them other than those things until they're written, and then I can figure out the music. If I work back the other way, it's just impossible because I won't be able to find any way to say the thing I want to say that fits, over that kind of music.
Yeah, I've been learning. Typically, the way I do it is I make chord progression and then I just improvise lyrics until or I improvise a story that kind of like, and then I make it fit. But I've been doing this recently where I write out like a story almost, or maybe like an abstract thing, like a poem. And then I'll put music to that instead, and that has been a really interesting experience for me personally, because I'm not I'm really good at writing stuff, like not good at writing lyrics, but I'm really good at telling stories. um I've found over the years, but when it comes to like lyrics, I guess it's because I've had to fit it in so into an already rigid structure that I've had the problems. So I'm finding that writing a poem, but I'm also having difficulty putting music to something that's already written.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something I got to practice on. So, what was the first song that you felt was good enough to present to Ford the River?
It was Civil War, The First Blow Struck, which I'm excited to talk to you about for a couple reasons. One is you said you were totally unfamiliar with ska music. This is an example of a ska punk song. So if you listen during the verses, you'll primarily hear the guitar playing those upstrokes cleanly. That's the ska part of it. During the chorus and the intros, you'll hear the guitars playing more like punk rock, every eighth note distorted.
So, what is this story about? Because it's about an event that happened around here, right?
Yeah. The other reason I'm excited to talk to you about it, because I've heard you've written a musical about escaped slaves.
Yes.
And that's also what this song is about.
Oh, so it's directly referencing the Civil War.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
The title of it is taken directly from an article in the local Lancaster newspaper contemporaneously when it happened.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. So we're gonna play that. Well, we only have a few minutes left on the radio. So if you want to hear our conversation about Civil War, you can follow us. We will continue this conversation on Facebook Live, facebook.com/Corey Rosen. The story Corey Rosen. That's the story, then CORYROSEN. You can find us there. If not, if you want to find Ford the River at future events, they will be. Well, where can they find you guys? You guys have Spotify, Instagram, or any of that?
We do have all those things. The easiest thing is just go to www.fordtheriver.com, and it'll just give you a link to all the various places you can find us.
Cool. They also have. I'm pulling up their events so I can restate those, because the most recent one is going to be in Pottsville, May 21st at Pilger. That's PILGUR something. We don't know. RUH. So that's PILGUR space RUH Brewing in Pottsville, May 21st. Sorry, and then Tellus 360 in Lancaster on May 25th. So if you want to hear some of their music, you can go check them out at those places at those times. I guess they're all at later in the night.
Yes.
Yes.
Probably both 7 p.m. start times, maybe 8. Probably 8, actually.
That would make it. We don't have shows beyond. We have lives before then. You can check those out. Check them out there. They do. I wish I could talk. They do have Spotify. They have their website, fordtheriver.com, we're gonna listen to your song, Civil War. Is that all it's called?
Civil War, the first blow struck.
The first blow struck. And then the radio will return to regular radio, and we shall continue our conversation on Facebook. That was Civil War, the first blow. So tell me the story behind that.
So I mentioned that I lived the first 5 years of my life in Christiana. Don't know if that was on mic or not. But Christiana is a small town just on the Chester County side of the Lancaster-Chester County border. A site where I was going to say famous, but most people probably never heard of it, but very important event occurred called the Christiana Riot, or sometimes called the Christiana Resistance.
I have heard about that, and if you want to hear more about that, you're going to have to go to our Facebook Live, because I totally forgot that the radio has to go back to the radio. So, with that said, this has been Corey Rosen with Chad Hogg on the radio. If you would like to follow us at The Story, you can follow us on Facebook Live, facebook.com/The Story, Corey Rosen. I hope you guys on the radio have a wonderful night. All right, now that we're off the radio, I have heard of the Christiana Riot, actually. So go ahead and tell me more about that.
All right, so this happened a few years before the actual Civil War. The title, called Civil War, the First Blow Struck, is coming from newspaper editorials saying this thing that happened is going to cause a civil war eventually, which in fact turned out to be true.
So what was the riot about? What caused the riot?
So several slaves had escaped from a plantation in Maryland and were on their way through the Underground Railroad, passing through Christiana. At the time, the law, the Fugitive Slave Act, said that anyone in a slave or free state needed to assist in the recapture of any escaped slaves.
Yep.
And so
that was a part of the Compromise of 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act.
yeah. So a U.S. Marshal, who were responsible for enforcing that act, came to the area with the slave owner and a posse of several of his men to try to capture the escaped slaves and bring them back. And instead of running and hiding, they decided, no, we're just going to stand here and we're not going to go with you. And history doesn't record exactly how the violence started, but at the end, the slaveholder and several of the other men in his party were dead.
And this, I'm assuming there was a few dead slaves, or was there?
I actually don't think there were.
Oh, really? So
I'm not positive about that, though.
Maybe a successful Nats Turner rebellion kind of situation.
Yeah. So then the escaped slaves continued fleeing further northward, as well as some of the people who'd assisted in the I don't want to call it a riot, the resistance. Whereas others stayed here and were tried for the crime of treason. Because,
oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They had assaulted a U.S. Marshal who was trying to enforce the law. And so they were tried, and as the song says, they were represented by Thaddeus Stevens, who anyone who's from Lancaster should probably be familiar with, and did in fact reach a jury nullification, where the jury said, we can't rule you innocent because by the text of the law, you clearly broke the law. However, we can't find you guilty either because your actions were righteous.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. So we were kind of talking about it during the song that this is kind of like the shot heard around the world before the Civil War.
Yes. There were other louder shots later,
but
this is the first example of a specific resistance to the Fugitive Slave Act.
Yeah, that's so. Why write about this?
I just found it fascinating. I mean, it is a really compelling story. I told you I like lyrics that tell a story. Maybe even more than that, I like lyrics that tell a story that's not just like, a story of two people who fell in love. I don't find that very interesting. A story that is teaching you something about history, teaching you something about politics, teaching you something about the human experience.
So you were a big fan of Schoolhouse Rock.
I don't actually remember ever hearing any Schoolhouse Rock as a kid. I've seen like the one about the bill and how it becomes law at some point as an adult, but no, I never saw them back then.
I was a gigantic fan of those as a kid. Like a conjunction, junction, what's your function?
Right, I remember that, hearing that.
Yeah, those were the highlights of my childhood. But yeah, that's really cool. So, how did you come across this story? I guess you lived in Christiana. I guess that's is there like a memorial there, or
I'm sure there is. I don't specifically remember seeing it. I don't know where I heard about it for the first time, but it's something I've known about for a long time.
And you questions forming. So how did you approach writing the lyrics to the song? What was there a specific point of view that you had? What was the main message that you wanted to get across?
Well, the point of view of the narrator is one of the people that is assisting the escaped slaves. So he talks about his co-conspirators. Samuel is an actual person who notified them that the marshal was coming. Parker is William Parker, an abolitionist whose house they were actually staying at.
I was wondering if you had actually used like actual historical figures or not.
Yes.
That's cool. So I assume you did a mountain ton of research.
You'd be surprised what you can get just from Wikipedia.
That's also fair.
Yeah.
But sometimes I know people like professors claim that Wikipedia isn't the best source of information, but for old stuff like that, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's the newer stuff you have to worry about. But in regards to like historical events, scientific discoveries, I think, in my humble opinion, I think it's worth it. It's a great place to find sources. Also,
Right, exactly. You can fact check itself with the sources it cites.
So, what was the response to the band when, or what was the response of the band when you brought this to them?
One part of the response was, "Hey, this is really cool. You've been holding out on us. You need to write more songs." Another part was, "This is really different arrangement-wise from our other songs. I'm not sure we can really pull this off, at least live."
In what way?
The ska part doesn't show up in any of our other songs. The choruses are pretty much the same as the way our other songs go.
So was that a whole learning experience for? Was that the rhythm guitarist or like the lead singer?
Well, no, I think it actually is the lead guitarist who recorded it.
Okay. So was that a new experience for him?
I think so.
Do you think he did he enjoy it, or was
Yeah,
he
I think
kind of
so.
okay? That's good. Does he incorporate it into newer songs at all?
No.
No.
Someday perhaps I'll write another ska-based song, but we haven't done any yet.
That's unfortunate.
The other big difficulty was it was the first time our singer had ever tried to sing something that he hadn't written. And the first time that I'd ever had somebody try to sing something that I'd written and maybe not sing it the same way that I would.
Right.
Which was challenging for both of us.
Yeah, because that's something I've always kind of had. Because I'm not a very good singer. But I know people who are very great singers, and it's hard to communicate what your vision is first when you have it so clearly in your head. For example, I have a country song now I want to write. But I know first off, finding a country singer who can have a country accent while singing. Second off, have the right country accent to sing it with, and those kind of aspects they align with a lot of different genres. Because with punk, there's the Green Day voice you can have. There's the or if you're going from like a more like kind of like rock, you have this Carry On My Wayward Sons, the Kansas, or Sweet Child of Mine,
Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses, yeah, like that kind of voice, where it's not necessarily pitch correct, but it fits. And or you have like the more streamlined vocals. So it's very interesting to have to work with other people and work within their confines. I'm sure that led to a lot of growth, though, between you
probably.
guys.
The part that was frustrating for me was I didn't really care that much about the melody. He picks different notes, they'll probably sound good too. But because I'd started out as figuring out the rhythmic, exactly how does each syllable fall to make like the right meter and have it all be symmetric, I really cared about the rhythm. And he kept singing things in different rhythms and like not being able to hear the difference between me saying, it sounds like this, and him saying, yeah, like this, but it's not the same.
That's unfortunate.
And so he tried briefly actually having me sing it, despite me also not being a very good singer. And even went as far as recording those vocals in the studio before realizing this is just not acceptably good. You can't sing. So that is him on the final recording. Pretty close to the way I originally had it, but it took a lot of work on his part.
Oh, I mean, it's good. That's probably learning rhythms is annoying for anybody, but as a drummer especially, oh my gosh, has it helped so much. So the way it was arranged was interesting to me, because you had the upbeats, and then you had the the almost genre switching aspects. Did you have that in mind originally, or was
I did. That's basically exactly what third wave ska is. Pretty much
really?
Every song in that genre is going to sound very, very similar to that arrangement-wise. It's going to have verses with this clean guitar playing the upstrokes. It's going to have choruses and maybe pre-choruses and intros and other things that sound more like a traditional punk rock song.
Okay, because I was interested because I for a lot of my pieces for my musical, I cater the songs to the feeling and emotion. Whether that be, for a really like raging shouting like it was, I would be like full out Mercado. And well, granted, that was kind of the feeling you went for. with the multiple voices too.
Yeah.
What did you get a chance to scream in on the voices on that one?
Yeah, we all participated in that. That was
That's
fun.
good. Yeah, that's one thing. Because I'm only one voice, but it is fun just to shout into a microphone and record it, and see how it sounds. Okay, so is there what more do you have to say about the piece?
Nothing else really comes to mind. When you were talking earlier about sort of my point of view, my motivation for writing it, I was thinking about it in the background. And I think part of why I wanted to write about it is it's really challenging to write a song about, say, white supremacy as it's going on now without offending people. But you can write a song about white supremacy as it was happening 200 years ago. And even the people who are involved in white supremacy now don't have a problem with that.
Right.
And so one of our band members works for the federal government. So he feels like he needs to be extremely careful that the messages in our songs are nonpartisan, non-political. And so some of the things I might want to write about current events, I can't do. But I can write about this.
That's so because I had to deal with that political nightmare as well with my musical. I was just doing read-throughs of it, and then George Floyd happened, and it's like, I don't feel comfortable putting this on anymore. So do you want to hear more of that process?
Yeah, I'd love to.
So I had started writing this musical in 2017, where I had this vision of a song of being set free from chains, the classic like Christianese kind of worshipy kind of stuff. And then I was like, recently I had just seen Aida. Have you ever heard of Aida?
I have heard of it, but that's literally all I can say about it.
Okay, well it was written by Elton John, one of my most all-time favorite musicians ever, songwriters, whatever. And I had seen it with my cousin, and I just fell in love with it. And it's basically about this. It's about slavery as well, about Egyptians and Nubians. And this Anubia princess comes up as a slave. It falls in love with the heir to the throne, and then all hell breaks loose because that's not kosher, and it's a tragedy. Everybody ends up dying. And I had noticed this trend recently of, if it wasn't Harriet Tubman, all slave stories ended in tragedy. And that was kind of the message, like 12 Years a Slave, Nats Turner Rebellion, all those. And that's not to say that they aren't worth telling at all. But I've just noticed a trend that it's all in defeat, all in oppression, and these still being in chains. And I'm like, well, why not write something that's different? Because there's so many success stories within slavery, and it sounds kind of wrong to say, but within the slaves of themselves, like actually escaping. There's one of the stories that I always find really, really inspiring is that this guy, I think his name was Henry, he shipped himself in a box to Philly, and that's how he gained his freedom. And there's so many different ways that people got to their freedom through using your shipping lanes, train lines, and all these other jazz. So I decided, I'm going to write a story about that. Use these fictional characters, but have these real life events, or based on real life events. So I did a mountain ton of research. I even researched train lines of back in the day, just to be, because I wanted to be as historically accurate as possible, because that doesn't lead to bad faith criticism. Put it that way. In which there is a lot of bad faith criticism, because people are people are people.
Yes.
And so I really wanted to make this as clear as possible that, hey, I'm not advocating for. And there was the question of why are you a white guy writing a black story, or why are you writing about slaves? Are you fantasizing about slaves? It's like, well, that's not the point. The point is that they escape, and that there's happiness. There are tragic moments, yes, but what's a story without tragedy? Or at least some extent of tragedy, or the conflict. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So I had written out the story, and now it was time to get opinions. And I didn't go to the white people for the opinions because that's not the ones that mattered to me. I really wanted to, and this was right. I think Ferguson happened in like 2015, and only from there like BLM became a bigger and bigger movement. And I grew up in a socially liberal place, to the point where uh, I had one of my bestest friends, uh, the same person I still connect with from high school. Uh, they were like, "You're a white guy writing this. I don't think you should do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, fair enough. I'll see what black people think." And so that was my goal. And I went to Carlisle for Dickinson University, one of the first, I think, historically black colleges and universities. And I went to the there was a operatic singer. I forget the name, and I don't have any evidence of him being there. So it's a really shaky one. But I did go there. He is a really good singer. He really cool guy, older dude, Broadway singer, incredible tenor, operatic voice. I went to one of his recitals, and I had asked him because genius me thought I would be able to go in there and just ask, and that didn't happen. But I did find out. Or originally I went because they had a Harriet Tubman slave exhibit, so I wanted to check that out. But I also really wanted to get some opinion from a different non-conservative uh, area because I only lived here, where even some like the black population that was involved was more conservative. I wanted more of a progressive line of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I went there and I was expecting all sorts of pushback and all sorts of criticism, and because that's what I was used to. At that point, cancel culture was kind of like a growing thing, and thankfully, or weirdly, I should say weirdly, the only critics like hardcore criticism of like you shouldn't do that, you're white, or that's a bad idea, was from white people. And the amount of encouragement that I got from this professor was beyond measure. I was sitting there just like this, and almost in fear of what he was thinking as he like listened to the music. And because I grew up in like a black Pentecostal church with everybody jumping around, and I was around blues and all that jazz a lot. So I really come to love the blues and all that jazz a lot. So I really, and that's rooted in black history. Like without African Americans coming over, they are Africans coming over, uh, forcefully. The blues, jazz, modern music wouldn't exist. So I definitely wanted to curb that in there to make a statement. And he had nothing but encouragement. And as long as I could, because I can cite, I don't know if I have the document still, but there was a document where I cited every single line or like every single scene to like a historically accurate event that happened. Like, I've done my research. But yeah, it was all support, and no really negative feedback. One of my friends, who's a black progressive, he said to me, "Well, Corey, is slavery just black history?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's part of black history." And he's like, "But isn't it also American history?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I guess you're right about that." And so he had made the point that because it's part of my history as well, that it's okay in some aspects, or in that aspect that I can write about it, and as long as I'm doing the due diligence of making sure that it's historically correct. Get this, one of the professors at Carlisle, I had told her that I had asked her for some opinions, and I was like, I'm going to put the vernacular, like African American vernacular into the musical, and she was like, "No, why would you ever do that? That's so racist." And I'm like, "What? You want me to put them speaking proper English? Something they didn't do?" like kind of whitewashing almost, and I was so surprised at that because it was this white progressive woman telling me to erase the history of black people. I'm like, what? You're not supposed to do that. That's so that was super interesting to me. But he had my other friend, his name is Sean Thomas. He really encouraged me and said, listen, if they ever say that you can't write this, then, or at least you shouldn't just listen to it. You should just ignore it outright. And that was right as George Floyd happened, and everything in regards to like racial politics kind of exploded. And at that point, I was like, maybe I should relax a little bit. And so now, I'm feeling more confident talking about it, more confident doing more stuff with it. I'm getting to the point where it's almost, I have a demo of almost every song, and I truly believe that it's some of my best work because I've been at it for 5 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. Do you have any questions?
Have you read the novel The Underground Railroad?
I've read some pages, not entirely.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty interesting. Imagines that the Underground Railroad was an actual railroad and puts things in all kind of different orders.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about how your story follows, things that actually happened, but this takes a very different approach of explaining what happened in the big picture by making up a bunch of stuff that very clearly didn't happen and couldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one thing I thought was cool about it. It was kind of the same kind of vibe almost, but I went for more historically accurate pieces instead of made up stories because I felt like that'd be disingenuous.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, that's never been staged?
Not yet. Nope. It's only been had 2 read-throughs, and that was pre 2020. And after that, I tried to do it for my senior recital because I thought people were willing to do it, and it just happens that people were not willing to do that, and that's totally fine, and I completely understand that. So,
what's the end game for a project like this? Can you just send it to a bunch of Broadway producers and hope somebody reads it and likes it?
That would be, I feel like that would be disastrous, given the climate politically. I think the end goal would be to workshop it with local theaters, and because that way they know you, and it's not some random Broadway executive. It's not somebody who's probably has a big ego or like has this activist like inert activist mindset. Because I'd rather deal with more genuine, down to earth people who want to see stuff grow, and it's also a community thing too. Like I don't, New York has the economy of whatever, but like people that could draw people to Lancaster too.
Sure.
And I want to create more of an opportunity locally that, people in New York City, there's 1,000 shows they can choose from. At Lancaster, there's only so many, and there's only so many actors, and there are some people who are dedicated to this piece that if I called them up and said, hey, I've got auditions for this musical, will you come? They will say, yes, I will come and audition for this piece. So I would much rather have that kind of community to support my work than just some random people in New York City.
Sure. I think part of why we're drawn to stories like this is that it's so important that we not forget them. They reveal so much about human character that maybe by remembering we can avoid doing terrible things in the future. I also think it's because we really crave situations with clear good and evil, and almost everything in the world is in fact nuanced.
Yes, there are certain black and whites, but there's a whole bunch of gray. And it's been the case that people take that gray and then mold it into black or white. And it's just not the case. There's so many, like Gandhi. People think Gandhi was the best person in the world, but he was actually a horrible racist in South Africa, called Africans there the equivalent of the N-word in their language. and advocated for apartheid. Just wish that Indians weren't a part of it.
Uh-huh.
So it's why it's so. But anyone who's the layperson who has never heard more about Gandhi besides he was world peace guy would find that shocking. He laid naked with his own niece to it was a test of his own moral so that he wouldn't be tempted to do stuff with his niece. And I'm like, that's more. I would never even put myself in that situation. I wouldn't even think of that.
Yeah.
And yet people put him on a pedestal. And same thing can be said for a bunch of people. Yeah.
Let's move on to a different topic. I think we've explored that one enough.
So yeah, good and evil, right? That kind of leads itself into religion. And you at one point were a Christian?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say I'm not anymore.
Okay.
It's just complicated.
You want to explore that?
Sure. I would say something that hasn't changed about me, has been true forever, is that I don't know whether anything beyond the material world exists. And I don't really think anybody else can know either. And that anybody who tells you they know one way or the other is deluding themselves. Unless they've personally had an experience that can't be explained in the material world, which I certainly haven't.
Have you ever, this is going to go into some trippy territory, but have you ever looked into the studies done by the government with like LSD and all
like MK Ultra?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of the studies said like all of them went to this place where these like giant ant beings were there. Like they described the exact same thing, and they were able they tried to like navigate through this altered dimension. I find that stuff so wacky to think about.
Yeah,
but then again, it's the government. I don't trust the government.
So I've got this agnosticism about whether there really is a supernatural world. Another thing that's been true forever is that humans are storytellers. I really like good stories. The story of basically the Bible, I think, is a really compelling story.
Very compelling.
It's always been true that I really appreciate continuing in rituals and practices that people have been doing for hundreds of years,
so you're
and staying connected to that, I suppose. Where I've changed is, for a long time, I felt that participating in the institutional church, especially the evangelical church, because that's what I was involved in, is good for people and good for the world. And that's what's changed. I don't feel that way anymore. And so whether I'm a Christian or not, I don't know, but I'm not involved in Christianity in any way at this point.
What made you switch between that being good and not being good?
Well, various things. One of the big problems I have with the church is that it seems like it leads people into an anti-intellectualism, anti-authority. Like, you walk into a church and you'll hear people say, like, if you're sick, don't go to a doctor. Get some essential oils and burn them. If you want to understand what's going on with your, like, psychological self, don't go see a psychologist.
Okay, that
do the Enneagram.
That I can understand.
And stuff like that. So that always bothered me, and I always felt really out of place there because it didn't make any sense to me that people would have those kind of views.
That's interesting to me because I know what you mean by essential oils now. Okay, that makes more sense to me now. But there was this whole that's fair.
And there was a big further shift in 2016,
right,
when the majority of evangelicals didn't just vote because they didn't feel like they had any choice, but actively promoted as the leader of their party and then the leader of the world, the least Christ-like person I've ever seen, and did so while simultaneously saying, like, this person's amazing, they're a Christian, even though anybody who spent any time looking at his record would obviously know that's preposterous.
That's fair.
And then the final straw really came in 2019, when I was involved in a church that I liked a lot, and we had COVID. And so the church shut down for a while, as everybody did, and then it started opening back up slowly with rules that you're supposed to wear masks in certain situations and whatnot. And nobody other than me and the leadership team in that church followed the rules that they'd set for themselves. You talk to people, find out people wouldn't get vaccines. They think vaccines, have microchips in them or something. Like, there just seems to be a total disconnect between the average person in an evangelical church and reality. I just couldn't see myself continuing in that.
That's fair. Yeah, there's always been an ideological split within the church. However, I feel like in the past 4 years, especially, it's just been wedged so much deeper. There's always been a Christian right to be said, like,
Yeah.
politically. However, it feels like, because you're right, there was in like 2016 and 2020 and 2019, there was a gigantic shift away from like just thinking for yourselves. Because if you think about the idea of a vaccine having a microchip for like 2 seconds, we don't, first off, I don't believe we have the technology to do that. That's first off. Second off, if they wanted to do that, they wouldn't. There's Occam's razor. You've heard that term before?
Sure.
Yeah. The least amount of assumptions is probably the most likely answer. It's just wild to think that some people would think that. I can to a certain extent understand the anti-authoritarianism. I'm typically a libertarian on most things, because I just don't believe that government is the right way to go about certain aspects, and I feel like they do a lot of wrong with wars and everything. But in regards to just, and to be fair, the media hasn't done a good job either. It's I feel like they're so complicated to the point where you either attached to the ideology way over here or the reality of the ideology way over here. But if you're in the middle, you are lambasted by both sides, and there's no way you can navigate that. It's it's so, and that has drawn a lot of people away from the church as an institution. But do you still follow Christ, like, biblically at all, or is that in question for you as well?
I don't really know what that means.
So you're like, okay, church is a mess, but I know that Christ is still Savior.
I would say I never knew that.
Oh.
I hoped it. I thought it was a good story. I liked, the way that story interacted with my life. Did I ever know it? No.
Okay, so were you ever baptized?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I guess maybe I would say I knew it at 12.
Right.
But then I grew up and realized, like we were talking about, the world is far more complex than it initially appears to be.
Okay, so you kind of like walked away almost from your faith, or like were maybe pushed away.
Yeah, it's just different than it was.
Fair enough. Okay, that's interesting. Because over my years, there's definitely been a lot of push and pull for Christianity for me. My mother died. Here's the quick and short of my life. I was born. That's one. Two. The market crash happened in 2008 or around that time, and we lost our house. By complete coincidence, quote unquote, God, a stroke of God, that my grandmother chose to move closer to my mother. She was all the way out in Pittsburgh, and so we had the chance to move in with her. Right after that, in like 2012, what seems to be right after that, at least in my 12-year-old brain, my mother dies out of the blue, heart attack at 40 years old, which is unheard of in most spaces. And right before even all of that, there's just abuse going on in the family. My parents are both cigarette addicts, alcoholics, and my mother cheats, and my dad gets angry. Put it that way. I had to call the cops on my dad and put him in jail. And so all of this trauma building up definitely led me away from God. But after all of that is where stuff gets interesting. because I start to connect these dots of like what was the chance of my grandmother moving over to because she has family over in Pittsburgh as well. That's why she was there. She had another daughter there.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the chances of her moving over just to be with her other daughter? You know what I mean? What's the chances that at this particular point in time that we lose our house? What is this chance? And when my mother died, she was an organ donor, and this is probably one of the things that drew me to Christ back the fastest was that the doctors could not use her organs because they were so messed up from cigarettes, alcohol, whatever. So had she had lived longer, she would have had been in immense pain, had be in the hospital almost like 24/7, would have been this gigantic, I don't want to say burden, but that's what it would have been for us. Like we're not financially the best scenario, so it would have drained us of all of our resources. And I don't think that I would not have wanted my mother to live that life of constant pain. And I think that is what really drew me back to Christ and God, because I was pointing the finger at me. It's like, why are you taking it from me? Did you, how dare you take my mother away from me? Blah 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 blah. I was being so selfish about it, and then God was like, well, if you wanted it your way, you would have had to see your mother go into like a wheelchair. You had to see your mother not know who she is, not be able to walk, not be able to do all these different things, and you would have to watch her suffer, and that would not be fun. I my mother watched her dad's go into that where he would just not eat, and she literally watched him starve. That's what happened to him. He starved to death. So I really do think that's what, and I know for a fact that's what got me back to God quickly is knowing His plan. And I don't know how deep you were in the Christian, but that's how I view it at least. And being able to trust that everything will be okay.
Yeah, cool.
Do you have any questions? I guess the question is, how deep were you into theology at all?
Reasonably deep. So, like, another thing that frustrates me about churches is that you go there and the pastor says, here's what this scripture means. I would much rather they said, here's what I think the scripture means. Here's what Bart thought the scripture means. Here's what Augustine thought the scripture means. Here's what the Orthodox Church thinks the scripture means. Here's the background information about the culture of the person who wrote this and who they were writing to. That there's not a interpretation of a 2,000-year-old book. There's many interpretations. And to just pretend that everything is easy and simple and wrapped up just infantilizes people.
I'll push back slightly on that. I do believe that the Bible was written in a time and a place for specific purposes. However, I will agree with you that people who just take one solid, because we don't know the direct interpretation of some verses. Some verses are very clear. Like the verse that often gets misused, that I can do anything through Christ who gives me strength. Paul, he was talking about relying on the faith throughout all of his problems, like being jailed, being threatened with death. That's very clear. But of all the other stuff, I will agree with you that pastors who say I have the definitive knowledge and know what this verse means, I'm gonna err a lot of times on that they're wrong, because you do have to do the
hermeneutic.
That's the one, hermeneutics of the Bible, and that's what I really loved about the school, is that you would go through a passage and you would learn, okay, John was a physicist, I think. John, physician. Yeah, he was like a doctor, and so his language is, but he was also like an artist, so his language is more diverse. Mark was a writer; he was very concise. That's why his book is the shortest of the Gospels. It was very to the point, and he was writing specifically. I think he was writing specifically to the Jews. I could be wrong on that. It's been like 3 years, but it was there was a time and a purpose and a place for all other things. Like people take Paul's versus like women should be quiet in church out of context all the time. It's not means you shouldn't talk ever. It was more like a cultural thing at the time that, hey, when the pastor's speaking, everybody should be quiet, including like no gossip between women or no whining from children. You take your child out of the time, and that's just one interpretation of that. That might not even be the case. We don't even know that's the what's been most likely the case, but we don't know. And we'll never know until we die and maybe go to heaven, maybe go to hell, if that even exists in the grand scheme of things. Because like you said, we don't know for sure, and we can't know for sure unless we go there for sure, and there's no way back from that for sure. And that's the issue.
Yeah.
Moving on from religion, I feel like we've expanded on that enough. Unless there's anything more you want to say.
No.
What's it like to another stroke of faith? What is it like to be a dad?
Well, it's great and frustrating and beautiful and terrifying.
That's a very apt description. So you had said you have children. Are you comfortable saying their ages?
Sure, 8, 6, and 2.
So that for those of you not having children, that's a wide range. You have the terrible twos. You have 6-year-old where they're almost out of the phase of taking everything literally. And when I mean literally, teaching kids, I'll put your hands up, and they'll just, like, that's not what I meant, but fair enough, I'll give it to you. And then 8-year-old is where they're on the brink of the rebel age. So, and one of your songs directly relates to your child. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So all 3 of my children were born quite prematurely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, due to my wife having preeclampsia.
What does that mean?
We don't know exactly what caused it, but the effect is significantly elevated blood pressure in the mother, and eventually, if you don't do something about it, organ damage,
really?
and potential fetal death. So
that's not fun.
Yeah. So from like, I don't know, week 24 or something, basically she was in the hospital being monitored round the clock with steadily increasing medicines as it got worse until reaching the point of saying, okay, we got to get this baby out of here now, which is usually far before the normal 40-week period.
What was the youngest?
I should really know that.
I'm not going to blame you.
One of them was 32 and a half. I don't remember if one was earlier than that or not. I think one was maybe more like 30. But in any case, they had to spend quite a lot of time in the neonatal intensive unit at the hospital before they could come home. And so they've all sort of been delayed in picking up normal skills because they're actually 2 months younger than what they appear to be, in a sense. And so my 2-year-old right now basically knows 3 words: mama, up, 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 and occasionally something else. But you'll hear something like once and never again. So there's like no verbal communication with her. And of course that was true when they were younger too. So all 3 of them, while they all have very different personalities these days, for the first year, certainly, maybe a bit more of their life, they mostly just wanted to be held by somebody who was moving at all hours of the day, every day of the week.
That makes sense.
So I spent a ton of time walking around in circles holding them. And while doing so, I would sing them songs about like whatever we're doing. And so this kind of grew out of that, was thinking about what are they trying to say? They can't verbalize it. But they know something's very wrong with me. Somebody's got to fix it. I can't tell them what to do, but they're going to have to figure it out.
All I can do is cry and get their attention.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so that is the context of me, now. Is there a shorter version of that?
No, it's actually much longer than that.
It is much longer than that.
I believe the full title is something like I want, me, mine, 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 now, now, now.
Something like that.
Which I did not come up with. One of my bandmates did.
Oh, really?
Apparently, it's a quote from the movie Hook.
I would not know that reference.
Yeah, me neither. But it seemed to fit well.
Yes, it does. So we're going to listen to that and then talk more about that. And that was I want, me, mine, now, now. Something like that.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So this is from the narrative or the perspective of the child screaming at you what they're saying, but all of that. So it's like look who's talking now, where
Yes.
we have the perspective of the baby, where we can understand the baby, but all the parents are hearing wah wah wah. It's almost like the Charlie Brown parents at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and this came from about you having to physically carry your children around for a extended amount of periods of time.
Yes.
And I assume you started to notice some patterns.
Sure.
Well, I could be wrong. You can tell me that I'm wrong.
I don't know exactly what you mean by it. Patterns in what?
In the way that the way a child, from my experience, and that's a little bit limited, but the way that they cry for food is different. The way they cry to be changed, the way they react or respond to needing comfort or love, or just they have their different responses to different things. Would you say that's right or wrong?
So I've been told that many times. Never figured it out myself. You have to use context and try things and see what works. I never could say, like, that is a hungry cry. That is a wants to be held cry. You just rule out the most common things first until you get down to something that works. That was my experience.
There's also that some some of the kids that I have dealt with are like that, where you just have to. All right, I guess I'll try this toy, or I'll try this snack, or that. I guess it depends on the kid.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of kids though that are very animated, and it's. Do you find physical humor funny, like slapstick?
Yeah.
Have you ever had to hold the urge to laugh at your kid?
All the time. Well, maybe not all the time, but yes, that has definitely happened.
There are some kids at the pool that are very funny when they're angry because they'll scrunch up all mad like a cartoon villain and then stamp their foot and I'm like, this is the funniest thing in the entire world and I cannot laugh because that will make it 10 times worse.
Yes.
How have you dealt with that?
Pretty much just how you said.
Same thing.
Turn away so they can't see you.
So having children, being a professor, are you you are a doctor, right? You could get a doctorate degree. Dr. Hogg. So having to and then also doing Ford the River. What is it like balancing your life between your work, your band, your children, and essentially your family?
Yeah. Well, the bad thing about my job is that it will eat as much time as you will give it, because anything you're going to do can always be better.
And the professor or the music?
The professor.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I could design a new way of explaining some concept to you and iterate over it several times until I find the one I like, and then decide, actually, I don't like that one, I'll go back to the other one.
So you can design your own curriculum? Almost.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. I know that.
So it can take a lot of time, but the good thing about it is when you spend that time, it's pretty flexible. I only have 12 hours a week that I'm actually in a classroom.
Oh, wow.
And the rest of my time is grading and preparing and, in theory, doing research and meeting with students one-on-one. And I can generally do that stuff whenever, which has been very nice. It's now my oldest kid is in second grade. He gets on a school bus at 8:30. He gets off a school bus at 3:30. And I've always been able to be there to put him on the bus at 8:30, be there to pick him up at 3:30, and fit all of my class time in between those.
That's cool. Are your 2 and then 4-year-old not school?
2 and 6. The 6-year-old is in kindergarten. Not at our local school district because that is half day, and I can't fit everything into a morning or an afternoon. Right. So he goes to a private kindergarten called the Jenkins School.
Okay.
And the 2-year-old is currently just bouncing between 1 day a week I'm home, 1 day a week my wife's home, and 3 days a week either my mother or her mother or my sister are home with her.
Okay, so because your wife being a physician?
Yes.
Right. What kind of physician? I feel like there's a few types.
Family medicine.
Family medicine. Okay. Well, she's a great mother then, probably.
It has definitely helped in many ways. Anytime something that involves somebody getting hurt or anything like that happens, I can just say, "You're the expert. Figure it out.
Listen,
I'll just do whatever you tell me."
Right. Your hands off of that. Oh well, tell me what to do. I'm listening to you. One of the most interesting things I learned about babies is how actually fragile they are.
Mm-hmm.
Working with kids and toddlers, teaching them how to swim, having them float on their backs, and turning them underwater, in a very nice, healthy way, not like ISR. Have you ever heard of ISR?
No.
It's where they literally throw babies in the water and hope they float.
They figure it out.
Yeah, it's utterly depraved in some aspects, but I didn't realize that if you do one wrong move, you can dislocate a shoulder without even realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned a lot about children, thank God, because if I didn't know the things I knew now about children, I probably would have been one of the worst dads ever, because I just wouldn't have I just wouldn't have known what they need, and I feel like that's a damage done to society. Were you ever? I guess your wife has always been training to be a physician, so did she kind of teach you, or was it more of this is happening, what do I do?
Well, yeah, by the time we had our first kid, she was already a physician. I don't know that she trained me so much, at least not in any way that any other more responsible parent wouldn't do for the less responsible parent. But yeah, you just kind of learn by experience. It's interesting what you said about them being so fragile. I find kind of the opposite. They're remarkably resilient. My 6-year-old fell off a slide that was like taller than me a few weeks ago. He's fine. If I did that, I would not be fine.
You would not be fine. So so the theory that I think, I'm pretty sure that it's more where it's more blunt force, they're more resilient. Where it's like tactile, that's where they get fragile at, because their bones aren't really formed yet. So they can take a hit to like the shoulder or the back or even the head at some points, and they'll be completely fine. It's more of the movements of those limbs that really matter. And being in a swimming class, having to move their arms and legs, that's where it gets kind of dangerous. If you twist a little bit and it goes whoop, because their bones aren't really formed or attached yet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
with the pretty flexible schedule I have, I'm able to spend a lot of time with the kids and do a lot of my work in the evenings.
That's good.
So at this point, all my kids are in bed by 8 o'clock, and then like 8 to 12 is my work period to get ready for the next day.
Has being in a music career, does your wife support that? How does that relationship work out?
She certainly supports it, yes. The first song on our debut album is also one I wrote, though not one we have to play here. And it starts out by saying, our biggest fans are 6 years old, which would be, at the time, my 6-year-old, who's now 8, and our singer also has a pair of twins about that age. The biggest fans are 6 years old. CDs and T-shirts are going unsold. Even our wives think this is a joke.
Yeah.
They'll tolerate it until we go broke. So that would actually be a good way to describe my wife's relationship with it. She's actually totally supportive of me. Does a lot of work that she wouldn't have to do if I were around at times, but also thinks the whole thing is kind of ridiculous. And it is. In fact, that whole song is about how ridiculous it is to be an almost 40-year-old playing in a punk band.
Yeah, that's very punkish of you to like state that as well. It brings a full circle almost. That's cool. Because do you think that, given your, I guess you're not spending a lot of time as I thought, maybe in the classroom, but more of at home kind of, and then whenever you have a meeting, I guess you can go on Zoom or.
These days you can, yeah.
Right.
It's the one good thing that came out of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I very frequently meet with students at like 9 p.m. through Zoom. It works for my schedule, and usually it works better for their schedule than any other time of day, too.
So you get a lot of time at home, or a significant amount of time at home with your kids, and you feel like you are balancing. Are you a developmental nerd of like child psychology at all?
No, I don't think so.
No, because there's so many studies, like the little things that really change a person at that age, whether it's just not saying goodbye, not giving them a hug, and like stuff like that. So, and I was rather depraved of that as a child because my dad was a gigging musician. Do you feel like you have been a healthy relationship with your children in that aspect?
Yeah, I do. And so we talked about how I balance my job. How I balance Ford the River is that it was originally advertised as a casual band, and that's very much what it is. So we rehearse once a week for 2 hours. It's after my kids are in bed, so that doesn't really affect them at all. Okay. We play 1 to 2 shows a month. They're usually pretty close by and start around the kids' bedtime. So like twice a month, I'm not there for bedtime, but it's not really a big deal.
Yeah, no, that's not that bad at all. What
if we were, going on tour across the country?
That'd be different.
I would be bowing out of the band because I can't do that.
Right.
But neither can any of the other ones. That's why it was great to find 3 people in a similar situation to us.
So, do you think you would ever show your kids your music?
Oh, my kids are very familiar with my music.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
What do they think?
Well, so that song said, our biggest fans are 6-year-old, referring to what was then my 8-year-old and the singer's kids. Now my 8-year-old kind of doesn't care about it, but my new 6-year-old is absolutely our biggest fan. You play him a couple seconds of any one of our songs, he'll tell you the title of it. He knows it better than I do.
Really?
He asked to listen to it all the time if we're in the car. We made a music video for one of our songs, which was really fun, and he's probably watched that 300 times on YouTube.
That's incredible. So are you, because some of them are explicit, are you not worried?
Yeah, I just decided to not be worried. They don't really pay attention to it, so at least for now.
At least for now. So do you worry that maybe they're building a like an idol out of you?
No, I mean, they still see me very much as like their dumb dad who doesn't get it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. That's good. It seems like you have a good control over it.
I think so.
That's good. A lot of people aren't afforded that kind of stability.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to talking about the band, as a dad punk band, everyone in there's a dad, right?
Not everyone. The lead guitarist is not a dad, but everybody else is.
Well, that's interesting. So they all have to deal with their other issues too, and I guess eventually, if they're willing, I could have them on and talk about it.
Sure.
Because I would be interested if any of them would be interested. My Wi-Fi is not working. This is wonderful. Because there are questions that because at some point you had to get rid of a drummer, or the drummer left. I forget which end.
Well, what happened is we had been scheduled to play our first show in March of 2019, or maybe April. So you can guess how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't because of COVID.
Yep.
And then there was a long period of time when obviously we weren't playing shows because nobody was leaving their house unnecessarily for any reason. And then I guess it was summer 2020, things started opening up. Caseloads went way down. It became reasonable to imagine going into a venue and playing music in front of people.
Yep.
And so we started trying to book shows because, after all, that's what bands do. And the drummer we had at the time was just never available / didn't quite seem interested. And after a while, we just decided, like, we love you as a guy, we love you as a drummer, but we need a person here who wants to play out, and you don't, so we're going to find somebody else.
So, yeah, so I've had that situation with work sometimes where where I feel like I can do the work, and then I get there and it's like, but I guess they love me as a person, and they love me as like, and they love me as a person, but as a coworker, I'm not cutting it, and it's not bad blood, not necessarily, unless maybe this turned into okay. So it's just a mutual release, and you posted a Craigslist ad?
No.
Okay.
So first of all, as far as asking him to leave, thankfully I didn't have to do that. The other people in the band, the lead singer guy is like a big sales manager, so he's very familiar with dealing with personnel. Just let him do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very non-confrontational. Would not have been able to have that conversation. So I'm sure we did advertise for a new drummer, but we're not successful. So in the meantime, our lead guitarist's twin brother, Alex, who is not a drummer, but like you, plays lots of instruments at least an okay level, decided to come and play drums for us.
That's cool. I was going to say, if you ever need to know other drummers, I've got a list.
I'll keep that in mind, yeah.
I can reference you to. Some of which are dads. So
that would be
right
good.
In, yeah.
Yes.
Speaking on how you are not confrontational, you also said you're kind of an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
You want to explore that a bit more?
Sure.
I don't think we hit that one yet.
No. What I said to you earlier is that I think the word introvert is overused by people. I think the actual definition of an introvert is somebody who needs time alone to recharge their internal mental energies, and I don't really think that's true of me at all. I'm just a person who has social anxiety and shyness. And so we did actually talk a bit about how I'm very comfortable in places where I have a defined role and I can do that role. Just like making small talk with random people is very, very difficult for me.
So you would never go up to a person at a bar and start a conversation?
No. Many of your other guests on here have talked about the networking possibilities of going to shows and talking to people. I can't
Not
do
you.
that. No.
So you would rather reach out to other people and be like, hey, I want to be on this show, and then talk about this, and that'd be much more comfortable for you.
Yes.
That seems almost weird in the fact that I guess because you're still reaching out to a stranger,
Yes.
but it's with a purpose, and that's the difference.
And often by email instead of having a conversation.
That's also fair. Yeah, that's interesting. So I kind of talked about how because I do believe I'm an introvert because I do need that time to recharge, and after I've been at a social event for a little while, I'm like, I'm gonna go on my phone and just not deal with anybody around me.
Uh-huh.
But the term shy extrovert popped up recently in one of my timelines, and I feel like that better describes me because a shy extrovert is someone who likes to be the attention or center of attention, likes to have this spotlight beamed on them, and likes to be, all the extroverty stuff. It's just getting there and being placed there is the problem. Like for example, I would never be able to. I've been getting better at this, but even doing this, like talking to you like this, creating questions in my head, like this is something I could not do a year ago. Not at all. The only reason why I have this ability is because I dated a girl who came up with these ridiculous, insanely good questions, and so I definitely picked up on that.
You've gotten very good at it, by the way.
Thank you. It was one of my biggest concerns doing this because I'm like I said, this is a new thing for me. I've never interviewed anybody in my entire life. Never had to think of questions on the spot because we go on tangents. We've been going on tangents, and then creating questions that are simultaneously interesting and relatable. So that's. I could ask you what animal would you like to be right now, but that's not related to anything.
Yes.
So definitely being a shy extrovert is what I would probably consider myself now, even though I definitely do need to have that time to recharge. I do like being the center of attention. I was Shrek in the musical. An introvert doesn't go out or it's rare that I've seen a musical theater introvert. So it makes a lot more sense to me than being a solely just an introvert.
I'll tell you a brief story about musical theater in high school.
Go for it.
Because I also got involved in it. Not really because I wanted to, but because after my freshman year of school, they took some number of the most exceptional students and said, "You're invited to join the National Honor Society," I think is what it's called.
Yep.
And I was not among them. And I'd been told, like, this is important if you want to go get into a good college, whatever, you should be part of the National Honor Society.
Propaganda.
So I asked about, what do I need to do to be a better candidate for this? And I said, well, you need to get involved in more things. And so the musical was like a pretty big deal at my school. And I was already singing in the chorus, not well, but singing. So I was like, fine, next year I'll do the musical. So we were doing The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah?
And during like the first day, everybody wants to be in the choruses, hanging out, and they're assigning little roles. And they say, "Who wants to be the Lollipop Guild?" Three guys who in the first scene come out and like kick their legs and sing, "We represent the Lollipop Guild."
Yep, that's right.
Yes. So two of my friends decided that the three of us would do that. So I was like, fine, I will be a member of the Lollipop Guild. And so they said, okay, go back and see whoever the choreographer is to talk about your dance steps. So we go there, and she says, "Oh, good, some male dancers. We haven't had any male dancers yet." And we said, no, we're here just for this one role. And she said, "No, you're not. You're going to do all of the dancing." Yep. And I certainly never saw myself as a dancer. Would never in a million years have raised my hand and volunteered for that job. But did it and probably learned some valuable things from it that allow me to be in front of people and comfortable, even making myself ridiculous.
Yeah, I will say I took ballet in college because I figured, no, it wasn't ballet. It was like fundamentals of dance, but ballet was a big part of it. And only because, first of all, you had to have a PE, and granted, I did do soccer, basketball, baseball, and all this stuff when I was a kid, but I was not in shape at this point. So I figured, well, dance isn't that hard. It's a lot of Pilates stuff, meaning using your body as like counterweight.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of using weights, you use your body, which is taxing to say the least. But it would also be helpful for me for my musical when I had to figure out dance choreography. Now I know what moves go where, and then we had to make our own routine. So we made a routine to Portals from Endgame. You ever seen Marvels?
No.
Well, it's like the final scene in the biggest saga of superheroes, where all the superheroes come back and fight the big bad guy. So it's just really epic piece, fanfare kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. It was a lot of fun. But one thing I kind of want to talk to you about, if we're moving on from this
Sure.
introvert thing,
I think we could.
okay, is the whole college. Because I had called the NHS being like getting into a good college kind of propaganda. What are
Mm-hmm.
your thoughts on that? Because there are certainly predatory colleges that seek to put people into debt, and
Mm-hmm.
they can't, people that shouldn't have gone to college, not because they weren't good enough to go to college, but because they just didn't have the resources and they didn't have to go to
Right.
college to do what they wanted to do.
I think being a person who sees college students all the time, I'm now aware that college admissions is actually not nearly as competitive as people made it sound to be.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there are definitely people at my college that, frankly, probably shouldn't be there. And so if you're not trying to get into a super elite school, which I don't recommend you do, I don't think you actually have to worry that much about will I be able to get into college. That said, it can certainly benefit you to be remarkable. I basically got to go to college for free. My tuition was paid for because I was a National Merit Scholar, which only means basically that I scored really well on the practice SAT. But it was to the college's benefit to be able to say, we've got 27 National Merit Scholars in our graduating class. So they offered anybody who had that a scholarship that paid for most of the tuition.
Gotcha. So I guess you didn't really have the experience of like the paying off the debt and then doing all that jazz. That's
Not for myself, but my wife has plenty of debt.
gotcha.
Medical school is preposterously expensive on
Yeah.
top of undergraduate work.
And
So we'll be paying that off for some time.
I don't want to say rightly so, but I understand why this college is for med students and all that jazz, as opposed to like plumbers or like electric, where you can get like an apprenticeship and work through that.
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely understand why med school would be important to have, not very much an apprenticeship, but actual learning. So, do you have any other thoughts on that, or?
So you're talking about predatory schools. They certainly exist. Ones that are for profit. Nobody should ever attend a for-profit university or college under any circumstances. It is never the right thing for you.
Why?
Because their mission is to make money. Go to your local small university, liberal arts college, your community college is going to be super cheap. All those places have their mission to educate you.
Yeah, and the bonus of going to a community college, you can get all your gen eds out of the way for much cheaper, and then go to like a university that has like a solid program or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And then that way you're not spending 2, 3, sometimes 3 years of, or at least 4 semesters of your college life on, public speaking, basic math, stuff that you probably already know or at least stuff that I knew at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That should not don't have any impact on your career at all.
Yeah.
Granted, I do appreciate the public speaking though, because they come in handy.
I guess so. I will offer a big caveat on that, which is, yes, I agree it's great to get a bunch of your coursework out of way at community college, but know exactly what you're planning to do before you start that, where you're eventually going to transfer, what
Yes,
courses are going to transfer, because it happens way too often that somebody comes to us having spent 2 years at community college and taken effectively nothing relevant to their major. So there's no way they're going to graduate in 2 years at our school.
Right.
So even though they got some credits done cheaply, they end up spending more time in school and paying more that way.
Really? Yeah, I did know that it's important to plan, and that whether you should never you should never think I should go to college just because everybody else goes to college and that's what I need to get a good job. That's not true whatsoever.
Definitely not.
That is the propaganda I've been taught. The propaganda that the boomers and the Gen Xers and told the millennials, and now there's all this debt, and now there's like and think about this. There's what was like trillions of dollars in debt, and only 13% of the population that has gone to college.
Oh, it's got to be higher than that.
No, it's 13%.
Really?
Yeah, and then I think it's 68% of that is all graduate degrees, is where all that debt comes from.
Yes.
So it's a lot of you don't have to go to college to get a good job. You don't have to. Granted, if you want to be a doctor, you should probably go to college. If you want to, but if you want to be like an electrician or do something with your hands, that's readily available at trade jobs or apprenticeships.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, college is just extra brownie points. You don't need that because if you're going to be a really good plumber, you're going to have to be a really good plumber.
Right.
You can't get that with a degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned that I've definitely seen people at all the schools I've worked at who probably shouldn't be there. It's really hard to tell them that, though, because they're, working toward achieving their dream, or trying to anyway.
That was an interesting conversation I had recently with Dr. Rob Bigley. He's the director of choral studies here at LBC. I believe that's his title. But one of his most, I had asked him what is one of the biggest mistakes students make, and he had said not being realistic or not leaning into, like, because there's types within musical theater. You got the mother type, you got the the lead, the perfect lead, and then you have like the father figure or the big buff guy who's always cast as the maybe evil or sidekick or whatever. And people come into these colleges expecting, oh, I'm going to get the perfect lead because I am this talented, or I want to do that. And they miss out on a ton of opportunity because they are so narrow-minded and don't want to be typecasted.
Mm-hmm.
What is one mistake that you have seen throughout your students?
Well, the mistake I'm really referring to is people who take a course, don't earn a passing grade in it, take it again, don't do anything differently, don't earn a passing grade again, maybe then do it again a third time, and never take advantage of the advice they're given about how they could improve their skills, things like that.
So it's just a bunch of ego breaking, you think?
I don't know what it is. In many cases, though certainly not always, when somebody's not passing a course, it's because there's just a bunch of work that they were assigned to do and they didn't do it.
Right.
And sometimes that may be because they have a really busy life. They're also working 40 hours a week and taking care of kids. And sometimes it's because their mental health is a mess and they just can't make themselves work on stuff. And sometimes it's just because they're too addicted to Elden Ring. And it's hard, from my perspective, to know which one of those situations somebody's in to try to help them.
Have you ever had to have, I guess you're non-confrontational, so I guess the answer is no. You never forced yourself to have that hard talk?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very unpleasant. Less unpleasant, actually, than the talk about, here's the evidence that you plagiarized. That's
Really?
absolutely the worst part of the job.
Oh, wow. Here's something I've always wanted to know. How do you find plagiarized words? I know it might be as simple as just like typing it in and Googling, but how do you know if it's been plagiarized? Like, how do you just guess? This sounds like something I've heard before. Or how does that work for you?
So the stuff that I'm grading is computer code, not like papers.
Fair enough. Okay.
Most of the time. And I'm sure there's some amounts of cheating that I don't see, but it's often extremely blatant. Like they're using things you've never taught them. You ask them to explain it, they have no idea how it works. Or you can just search for this chunk of it and find it on the web.
So it's literally just yeah, that makes more sense to me than, okay, I didn't really think that through. Because I've BS so many papers. Not college papers, but definitely high school papers. Because I liked my college work. I didn't like my high school work. But I would never get. I guess BSing is different than plagiarizing, but I would definitely spark notes a book report and put that into my own words.
Uh-huh.
And never get caught. But so I guess but with code, you literally have to do the work, and like there is no workaround besides you either do it or you cheat.
Right. Is the program has to actually work.
Yeah.
And if you just put a bunch of random words in order, the chance of it working is approximately zero. So either you do it yourself or you take a working version from somebody else.
Yeah,
There's really no like doing it poorly.
fair enough. Well, I do want to get to this last song. We are going for a long time. Um, this is probably the last topic we'll talk about. We'll talk about Penn's Woods There and Back, which is about.
So it started out as a song about all the places I've lived in Pennsylvania and the things I loved about them. But then it sort of became a more melancholy song about how when you leave a place and a group of people, you can't ever really go back and have it be the same.
Mm.
And then that then merged with a sense that a lot of places that I would have bought records at or gone to see shows at don't exist anymore, and that's really sad.
So it's a reminiscing song in
Yes.
some aspects,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a little regret.
I don't think regret would really be the right word, but like the bittersweet side of nostalgia.
Gotcha.
Wishing you could get back to that because you miss it.
And this is a song you wrote.
It is.
And it is called "There in Penn's Woods,
Mm-hmm.
There and Back Again."
Yes.
That was Penn Woods there and back again, written by yours truly, Dr. Hogg, Dr. Chad Hogg. So it's all life, isn't it? About moving places, moving forward, the eventuality that relationships are always changing, even in the present. Is how do you deal with having to move from these different places and then making all these different connections and then all of a sudden having to move again?
Well, in general, I hate change of any kind. I'd be perfectly happy to have my world stay the same forever. But that's not the way it works. So
Not the way it works.
the move from Bethlehem to Williamsport was just that's where you've got to go because that's where your wife's getting residency. The move back here was much easier because we specifically chose to live here because my parents and sisters live about 45 minutes east of here, and my wife's parents and sister live about 45 minutes west of here.
So it's a really nice central location.
Yeah, perfect for us.
Did you guys make any meaningful? I assume you made some meaningful connections down in Williamsport.
Absolutely.
Do you connect with them at all?
Not really. Through Facebook, things like that.
But nothing much else.
No.
Yeah, that's. Do you still connect at all with your high school friends?
Again, not really. Once every couple of years.
For like the reunions or whatever. Maybe?
Well, not at like official ones that have 200 people at them, but
Right.
like little reunions of 5 or 6 people who choose to get together.
Yeah, that's some. It's been interesting. Me just graduating in 2021 and then having like, it's weird because my the MWPA department, it can be very segregated in that there's the musical theater majors and then there's everybody else. And all the musical theater majors are in there spending time with each other almost 24/7, and then really seeing like it's been the case that even I have walked into a practice room and seen someone crying and breaking down and everyone having a powwow around them. So they really get to deeply know each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the case with all of us other people because we're not together 24/7. But it's been interesting because especially the people that don't live here, like they aren't local. They go back to like San Diego or Delaware or Maine or other places, and it's kind of sad because one of my friends lives in Pittsburgh, and he's my first roommate, Matt Cross, super awesome drummer by the way, is one of them on my list, but Pittsburgh's a bit far of a drive.
Yeah.
But it's heartbreaking. It's bittersweet is the proper term to use. It's especially because you don't realize the amount of time that's passing between the time you like last spoke to them, so you don't know what's acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know how to like approach, especially maybe as an introvert. Maybe you just rather keep it like it is, and maybe not reach out because maybe you're feeling anxious about it.
Absolutely.
That's one of the bigger. That's why I'm a shy extrovert. I will say that, but reaching out to people to do the show is like hard because some of these people I haven't seen we've had interactions, but some of them have been awkward.
Mm-hmm.
The relationships happen. Some people walk in on stuff they wish they hadn't seen. Or you say something stupid, or you play something stupid, or you make an embarrassment of yourself in front of your peers, which is horrifying experience, and it's awkward to reach back out to them when you're not seeing them every day.
Yeah.
So you would rather leave things be than spark up an old relationship?
I don't know if I would say that, but my actions certainly say that.
Mm.
When we started playing shows, somebody said to the other band members, we're going to be here. Bring all your friends. And I said, look around. These are all my friends. Which isn't quite true. I do have another small friend group that bonds over other things here. But, even being in this town for 4 years now, I have like 8 friends that people I interact with on a social level. And I feel like that's kind of what you can do as a older person with a job and kids and whatnot. So don't have time for old friends because I've got new friends.
Right.
And I don't have that much time for them.
Right. Yeah. I've noticed that my social circle is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. In regards to people like I will die for, or almost. Well, yeah, I would die for them. But in regards to like who I know deeply, or are willing to have them, uh, represent me almost,
Mm-hmm.
like the true friends. One of those is from high school way back when, just because I've always kept up with her and she's always kept up with me, and we've had a really special relationship where she went to Philadelphia, and I'm here in Lancaster, so we are like, oh, let's have a slumber party, and so I did that, so that kind of solidified, and I would drive her to college because she doesn't drive. Funnily enough, that's how we actually became friends. She worst driver I've ever seen, and she would not be offended by that because she doesn't drive. Because it gives her so much anxiety to drive. So that's how I chose her over this guy who I just did not like. And that's how we became really best friends. So I have one of those from high school, college. I There's nobody directly from college that I would say I directly interact with day to day, except my roommate Hunter Wood. He's one of the director. He is the director of worship at Victory Church. Seen them?
I probably have. I can't place it right now.
Regardless, it's I do have a few other friends. I'm going to a wedding next weekend. My first ever actually going to a wedding and being a groomsman. I'm really proud of that. All the other weddings I've just been to DJ, but it's become the case that you have your high school friends, then you move on from them, and you have your college friends, and you move on from them, and then you have maybe your work adult friends,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really the extent of all you can handle as your life gets more complicated, and relationships change. You do an awkward thing, you do a thing that upsets somebody, which creates a ripple effect, and you fall in love with somebody, and that takes like half of your friends away.
Uh-huh.
And so, or you have a child, and that takes even more of your friends away because you just don't have time. And they be going. It's a sad reality, and you only have time for those little brief moments and everything. Some of the people from my high school, I couldn't search up their names because they got married, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
what?
Yeah, I'm not a super active Facebook user, but I read it every day to see what people post. And occasionally people will want to be my friend. And quite often it's a woman whose name I don't recognize because I knew them as whatever their maiden name was.
Yeah,
And it was 20 years ago, so I don't even know them to look at them anymore.
right. Yeah, granted, it's not been that long. It's only been like 4, 5, 6 years. Oh no.
Keep on going. In a couple
Yeah.
blinks of an eye, it'll be 10 and then 15.
Yeah, I graduated in 2017, so that's 5 years now. Yes, that math is correct. Yeah. See, some of my friends are no longer. Some of my friends are no longer alive. Some of my closer friends, and that's was a gigantic hit to me when my friends. And I'm only 22, so I'm sure that's not that much of a rarity for you.
I only know of one person I was close friends with who is dead, and he was already dead by the time we were 22.
Mm. Yeah, 2 or 3 of my friends have died. No, 3 have died since then. It's such a world shattering moment when someone like my parent died, which was world shattering.
Of course.
But having a person that you spend the night at their house, or you know not all of their issues, but you have a deep understanding with each other, and like you've had one of these persons was a bully, so but it was still sad.
Yeah.
You don't want to see people die. I don't want
No.
to see people die. Some people be like, well, he deserved that. No, nobody deserves death ever, in my opinion. It's such a I guess the only word I can describe it is bittersweet. It's like, dang, I wonder if what if I did this? And those questions start popping up in your head.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends died of suicide, so I wonder if, what if I reached out to him and I was like, hey, you want to hang out? What would have happened then, or like that kind of stuff. Do you? I'm sure everybody has these regrets. Do you? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, my dead friend also died of suicide. We weren't particularly close at the time because we'd been high school friends and we all went off to different colleges. But the last time I saw him was probably 3 months before he killed himself, and we had a fantastic time together. So I don't have regret because I don't know what else I would have done.
Right.
But it was just so surreal to think that I wasn't involved in his life to know what was going on with him.
Right. Yeah. And it's often said that the most suicidal people are the most outwardly happy.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Williams is a big example. And it's so earth shattering, reality shattering, to realize that this person who I had known really well, I don't know at all. I didn't know, or I've come to not know at all.
Yeah.
And it's I'm sure we can go on for this forever, but I feel like that's probably good space, unless you have something else to say.
No, that sounds like a good stopping point.
Yeah. So a few questions, mainly one question. Actually, I have two questions that I want to ask you before you go. One question I thought this was fun to ask. This is something I've asked previous partners of mine, just as it's like a trolley thought experiment. If it was your wife on the line or one of your children on the line, who would you say? Which one would you save?
The child.
And why?
Because that's certainly what the wife would want.
Fair enough.
Also because the child has many more years to enjoy from a utilitarian perspective.
Are you more of a utilitarian?
Probably.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, in the trolley situation, it's always. I'm sorry, one person, but sorry.
Yeah, I mean, probably what actually happened is I'm too paralyzed by indecision. So whatever the train was going, it's going to keep going there.
Yeah, I feel like that's most people's answer. Like if they had that, they wouldn't have the reaction time to think about it. But yeah, that's interesting because some of my partners were really upset at me because they were like, "You wouldn't save me," and I'm like, "You wouldn't want to save your child?" Like what? So I like hear their point, but it's also like, listen, I would give my life in an instant for my child, and I'm not even a dad.
Mm-hmm.
I already know that for a fact. If it's my child or me on the line, or my child or my wife, it's the child. Point blank, done. Case scenario. There's no changing my mind. So that leads into. Do you have anything else to say on that?
No.
Next question then. How about if there is something that you wish you had known when you had started, and this can be in regards to your collegiate career as a professor, your music career, your dad career, because dad is a job.
Absolutely.
What is something that you wish you had known when you had started?
So I can make this kind of relate to all of those, which is don't let embarrassment, fear of rejection, things like that stop you from trying something. I said that it took me basically 20 years from picking up the bass to get into a quote-unquote real band, one that got far enough to actually play gigs in front of people. And I said that was partially, or maybe I just described it as, well, it's really hard to find people, but that lets me off the hook for not trying harder.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't try harder because it just seemed too scary. And the same thing applies in so many other areas of life, too.
So you might have been feared that you were going into the sunken cost fallacy. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with the sunken cost fallacy, but I don't think it really relates to what I was trying to say. Just that, it was really hard to go into the rehearsal room for the first time and play with those guys, but I did it.
But you did.
And I could have done it 20 years ago, and if I had, I'd have 20 more years of awesome memories of having played music with people. So it's too fun to have not done, just because I was afraid of failure.
So you were more as taking the step versus not taking the step.
Mm-hmm.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Right.
That kind of stuff. Okay, that's a good one to end it on, because it is, you can't be afraid, because either life is going to happen to you either way, and you have to react to it. If you want to get ahead and do what you want to do, it's not going to come to you. Maybe once in a million, but this didn't come to me. My music career didn't come to me. I had to go out there and do it, and that's the only way that you can really take hold of your future. In some aspects, the future is always unpredictable, but there's ways of guiding it. I'm going to be a lot better pianist if I practice every day for like 30 minutes versus if I only practice once a week. That's just a fact. Just a fact. So if you take anything from this episode, don't be afraid to step out.
That's right.
And with that said, that has been Corey Rosen with the podcast, with the Corey Rosen with the Story podcast, with my special guest, Chad Hogg.
Thank you, Corey. It was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of fun. And with that said, good night, everybody.